Tell you what, I'll take the other side over here. I don't want to put you on the couch alone.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
I don't want you to think this is the psychiatrist thing. You and I have dealt in markets for a long time. People think that makes us crazy as it is. So, a lot of these people don't really know you in some ways. They see you on CNBC. I've known you for a long time. We've done a number of things together. They don't necessarily appreciate that you've got background beyond that you were a major hedge fund manager, that you're Harvard Law. You actually were school chums with Elliot Spitzer once upon a time, that you were at Goldman. You've got a much broader background than most people actually appreciate before you ever got to the point of founding TheStreet.com.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you very much.
And I don't know that I've told you this or not. They would not know this, but when my firm does focus groups in Europe, other than Warren Buffett, your name is the only market maven name that has recognition in Europe. That's really impressive when you stop and think about it.
It's esteemed grouping.
It's really quite nice. But our topic today is fake news. We're going to stick to the time limit and move pretty fast. By definition today, some people's fake news is somebody else's belief in reality. And that runs the potential of the risk and concern and fear that fake news moves markets in bad ways. Before we get into more detail, in your mind, does fake news move markets at all?
It can, because there's a concerted effort by some people who want the fake news and can move it quickly. You were kind enough to give me my background. When I first wanted to write about stocks, I went to Jim Michaels at Forbes, and I said, Ken Fisher writes about stocks, and he's a manager. I want to write about stocks. And he said, you are a hedge fund manager, and you want to write about stocks, you might be in and out of that stock instantly. I think there are a lot of people who want to be in and out of a stock, in before they break so-called news, and out after they get it, and they get away with it. And they get away with it because there is no sensitivity among the press or among the Justice Department that somehow this is a crime.
So it is a crime, it's a felony. And you know more about that than I would. But in days, I didn't study law. I just oversaw a law department for a long time. We've had this stuff, however, for a long time. Right. We had yellow journalism. Foster Winans went to prison for exactly doing that for a major organ. Other people have had these problems. In those ways, it's not new. It's just now proliferated into platforms and other functions. How is it that people do things? What exactly do they do, and why is it that no one notices? And where's, oh, by the way, the SEC in this?
Look, the latter is very quizzical, because the SEC should be looking at all of this. Anytime
Can they? Do they have the breadth to do that?
Well, maybe their budget doesn't allow them, but they have a market surveillance group that should be able to look at something that's popped and then went down the next day and question why it popped and then work backwards. But I think some of it is entertaining. So Ken knows I like to.
He is always, whenever you do something with Jim, he's the most prepared guy you would ever see. He's always got a ton of notes, and they're always scribbled, and he's endlessly prepared. He must have been a Boy Scout.
Thank you. Well, I was an explorer, we called them. Now,
okay, good for you.
Here's a piece from Vanity Fair Hive, and I've had Hive on, and they're excellent. And it says, will Apple buy Snap? When this appeared, Snap, which is a company with very dicey fundamentals, immediately went up 75 cents to $17 stock. And the headline underneath it is assessing the wisdom of an increasingly popular Silicon Valley dinner party parlor game. I don't even know if people got to that line, Ken. I think they just said, hey, Apple to buy Snap, that makes so much sense. Apple needs to be in social media. They missed out on Facebook. That makes sense. Let's buy Snap. And that's the kind of thing that was opinion. This was opinion, and it came out as fact. And I think that bridge should be blown up like the bridge over the River Kwai.
So when I started writing for Jim Michaels in 1984, I'm writing opinion. There's the 5 W's and the H. People are expecting my opinion's my opinion. They're not expecting me to be news. They're expecting me to be opinion. News was someplace else. nowadays I read stories all the time where I actually get to the end of the story. I can't quite figure out where the 5 W's and the H are. How do you, whether it's at CNBC or at TheStreet, how do you, when you see stuff coming into you, determine that this is something that you should then push back out to the world?
I'm old-fashioned, Ken. I look at the byline. If it's the byline of someone I know, a byline of someone who has gotten to the point where I've read them long enough, I trust that person. So if I say, oh my, David Faber just went out and said there's no way that Nordstrom family can get a deal done, that means that deal is done. There will be other people who will still write after David that say there's a $54 bid coming for Nordstrom. That person I never want to read, because I know that Faber doesn't want to put his name to something. There are people at TheStreet whom I read and I say, okay, that person has been in the market for 35 years and is worried about his reputation. To be worried about your reputation is that's point one. Point two is, do you feel like you need to apologize? There are a lot of people who feel they don't need to apologize. They'll get it wrong. When David and I make mistakes, we say, before we get started, let me just tell you. And I think that it's embarrassing when you say it, but reputationally, it's what must happen if you're going to be trusted.
So this is wrong as opposed to what's normally thought of as correction.
This is
correction is, I said this, but I was wrong on my facts. It wasn't 10.7, it was really 8.2. Correction. This is mea culpa, I was wrong.
Mea culpa. And I think the really good organizations, the FT, if it makes a mistake, it's going to have a mea culpa. The question is, will they make it even bigger than the story? Because a good organization recognizes that they have to. A bad organization just figures, hey, maybe no one caught it. Maybe no one caught it, but somebody lost money on it. And in the world that I'm from, if someone lost money on it, then there's an explanation that has to be given about what was the process that you got. What were your checks? Did you think? And that brings me to a second point. There used to be 2 or 3 editors between what you wrote and what I wrote and what you saw. And every one of those editors would be equally as skeptical as the previous. And the last one would look you in the eye and say, you know it's going to be difficult to keep your job if you're wrong about this one. And I had one last week about Larry Kudlow getting the job as the chief senior economic advisor. And I sourced that piece. I was out in San Francisco. I sourced that piece with 4 different people before I went to Larry to get it confirmed. And the next day I'm told, because I don't Google myself, because I've learned a long time ago, don't Google yourself, that the Washington Post wrote a piece that attacked me for breaking the story because I was too close to Larry. Larry was my partner in 2005. If I'm too close to him because 13 years ago, I worked with him, well, guilty. I mean, I couldn't believe that was somehow that my sourcing was just a joke and done for show. I mean, my sourcing was to be sure if I went on, I wasn't going to be wrong and mortified and have to come on at 4 o'clock to explain why I got it wrong, which is what I would have done because that's what they would have told me to do.
Jim has few opinions, and he offers them very softly. That's why we have him up here. That's very good for the FT. So, in a world of rumors, in a world of folks trying to profit off of peddling a story, in days of old, in a world that we both remember from a long, long time ago, you saw a lot of that coming from short sellers.
Yes.
And that short seller world, of course, is still out there. Do you look at that differently based on the sourcing of where the story is coming from? And do you have any sense of ability to see when somebody's peddling something to you, who's behind the peddling?
I immediately ask, whether it be on Twitter or who's ever come to me, I said, how short are you? How big are you? Why are you trying to tell me this about Tesla? How much would you make if Tesla dropped $10? I want to know those things before. And look, I think Tesla is an overvalued stock, but candidly, there are people. I always tell people, my friend, a Pulitzer Prize winner, friend Jim Stewart, always said, listen, Tesla's one of those companies where if you like the car, you'll buy it, okay? So when I get and then if you buy it, you'll like the stock. And therefore, it's a virtuous circle for Tesla stock. But if I can't get a straight answer about how big the short is, I'm not interested. And I love it when the shorts say at the very beginning, I am short this stock. Here's what I believe, whether it be for Wayfair, which is one that I've been hit with many times, whether it be for Tesla, when hit many, many times. I need to know what profit you would make. Not even that you're short it. How much would you make? Because I just don't want to be a tool.
So let's go the other way. Let's flip that then. So now you're on the long side. Do you ask the question about the long position?
Yes, absolutely. And we call that BGL.
But
BGL,
now,
bag them, gun them, and liquidate them.
But now let's go there. Let's go there, because if you're going to do a pump and dump, the fact of the matter is that I own stocks that I got $1 billion of. I can't dump them, right? The bigger the position, intuitively you'd think that the fake would come from a relatively small position that you could dump. So the bigger position you'd think would actually be you can't dump it, you can't get out of it. Do you do that in reverse for the long side versus the short side?
I will. If someone comes to me with a long, that's a tout. I regard that even more serious than a short in a lot of ways. It's a tout. And I have to make a bunch of calls. And I'll call, fortunately, wisdom of age. Fortunately, I'm old, which we'll hear like once. Maybe you'll hear that once this year. Fortunately, I'm old. And there are many people who have been with me for long enough that it would be shocking to our relationship if they told me something that was a lie. And so I got a call the other day on a stock called United Rentals. And the person said, this is really good for Caterpillar. United Rentals is going to be buying a lot of stuff. And you have to understand that because there might be tariffs in China, just for whatever Caterpillar loses, they will make it in United Rentals. So I call someone who's close to United Rentals, and they don't buy Caterpillar stuff. They don't buy Cat. It's not their stuff. So had I just gone with a very natural call, which is, hey, before you short Caterpillar off of Trump and tariffs, beware that United Rentals is a huge buyer. Well, that would have been the end to me. I mean, that's a nail in a big coffin, hopefully, of a journalist. And I don't want to be the guy who just says, wow, that's a good idea. I'm going with it. It's just not worth it. It's just not worth it.
Let's go to bigger size still.
Okay.
If you were to talk about sectors, if you're talking about the market as a whole, can fake news move the market as a whole? If somebody spread a rumor about, you make it up, say somebody said something bad about, President Trump, let's say. That was funny. Could that move the market?
I think that let's say that I had gotten the Kudlow story wrong, and I had said that Navarro was going to get the economic job. Navarro's a guy I knew at college. He's known him for years. He's a really smart guy. I think that I could have moved a lot of stocks with that story because Navarro is a fair trader, meaning not a free trader, and it would have hurt the market even more than the tariffs that were put through today, of which Navarro probably had a hand in. I haven't talked to him today about the tariffs. But Navarro would have moved stocks tremendously. And a phony story that Navarro got in, which is one of the reasons I was so worried about the Kudlow story. A phony Navarro story would have really, really decked a lot of different companies.
So now let me just do one last question before we get to audience questions, which if you're wanting, you can load us with. At TheStreet.com, what do you see and think about now to try to build credibility in a world where media has been under credibility assault in recent years? Specifically, what would you see TheStreet.com should do to help build credibility for the future?
Some of it is longevity. I'd like to think because we've been in for 22 years and weren't destroyed by any of the things that would make it so we had no credibility, we can fall back on that. But I would like to see you got to make a correction and you got to go out there. And if you're doing a podcast and you got the story wrong about Alphabet and a tariff in the UK, you need to do a story about that story. And when people know that they have to do the story about that story, it is not a great thing because it's just an esteem killer. But as long as people know that there is punishment for getting things wrong, and the punishment isn't don't worry about it, you'll get them next time, then I think you get better journalism. But it has to be stern. Now, we're in a new era where being stern is now considered to be inappropriate in a lot of cases. And this is an era, as a 63-year-old, I struggle with.
You're a young guy.
My editors when I was going, were always strong, okay? And they were stern. And when they were stern, it meant don't screw it up. I think there are a lot of people who are journalists themselves, so there's no one even going to tell them that they write on Reddit for what. My daughter gets a lot of news on Reddit, which is painful for me. Until Brian Krasanich told me that he was interviewed by Reddit, and I said, oh my God, now I got this to read. But I think that as long as there's pain, and as long as there is an admonition, and as long as there is an apology, you're going to get credibility. If you have to do it too many times, of course, obviously you shouldn't be in the business.
So now it's being painfully clear that I made a serious error.
What?
Well, I forgot to pick up the tablet. And they're taking care of me, which the FT always does. So looking for audience questions here. Right now, we have one. Maybe more are coming. And the one is, some people say it's the outsider traders we have to worry about more than the insiders. What do you think?
So like
outsider
art?
No, that's not. No, I think they're referencing all the things we've been talking about, the short sellers, and as opposed to management.
Well, look, I think that
in a lot of the world, insider trading is not illegal.
I think that if you can put something, when Morgan Stanley was at 12 going to 9, there was a report in a website which said that it was insolvent, that it was going to go under, might go under the week after. And when you report that, if you say, listen, but don't worry, that's from some website that said X, and the website doesn't have that the guy shorted, which, by the way, all that I just mentioned occurred. Okay, it all occurred. Then you have to do, it's your duty right then to get a hold of that CFO, and you got to find out the other side of the trade. You just have to. Everybody in journalism had to try to get a hold of the CFO. I got a hold of her, and I hope that I did something good by getting the other side of the story up.
Well, my tablet's gone bonkers on me, so I don't have your questions. How terribly rude of technology. We need to come up with a better platform. Is there anybody from some organization that can deal with a platform here? I'm not sure which of the many buttons that I could push is the right one for what we've got. No, that doesn't do it. I already did that about 5 times. So we've got a couple minutes left. Tell me the most egregious versions of fake news that you've actually seen. Things that you've seen come at you that you knew. You've been around a long time, you got a nose. Nose goes a long ways if you've got experience and time. You're a young guy compared to me, but I appreciate that.
Well, it happened, I'll tell you.
Tell me the worst.
Egregious?
Yeah, tell me something, tell me an ugly story. People love stories. Journalism's full of stories.
Yeah, not that someone said that 50% of Facebook's earnings are about to go away because of what happened. That was said this morning. Or that 50% of PayPal's earnings are going to go away because of the eBay split. That was said last week. These are things that people trade off of that I don't like. I think the worst one I ever saw was a call I got that said that Dayton Hudson is about to get, that's the name for Target back then. Dayton Hudson's about to get a bid, and you should get long it. And I said, look, I don't do that stuff. That's how you go to jail. And then someone else called me and said Dayton Hudson's about to get a bid. And then there was at 7:30 in the morning a story that appeared on the wires that Dayton Hudson had gotten a bid. And the whole thing was phony. And all of these people liquidated into the up 10. And I just figured that, well, the SEC will get the phone line, they have to get the phone numbers, right? I mean, don't they have to get everything on that? Doesn't everybody get prosecuted on that? And they got away with it.
When was this?
Oh, it would have been 1985, 86? Statute of limitations.
You know, Elliot Spitzer could have become governor off of that.
Well,
We got
I never say no comment. I'm going with a no comment here.
we got time for a 60-second answer. Is this an opportunity, fake news, for savvy traders to profit, not knowing anything about, not knowing who's coming from behind? Is fake news an opportunity for a good trader?
No, they'll fail. It's like you go into the horse race and you hit the first, you hit the second, and somehow you think you're going to hit the third. No, the answer is absolutely not. And you know what? I'm so glad about that because I want everyone I'm out of the business. I want people like you in the business, longer term view, really get it and explain. Because these younger people, if you explain, you entertain, they will get involved. They won't just say, oh, I've got a bad student loan, because we need younger people to get in the market.
Jim, thank you so very much.
Thank you, Ken. Appreciate it.